God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hi everyone, welcome to Unapologetic. I'm so excited you're here today for today's episode. We are going to have a discussion with my friend Ruth Chou Simons about her new book, When Strivings Cease. We talk about how God's grace enters into every area of our lives: parenting, relationships, housework, and our calling, the calling that God has on our lives. I know that you will be encouraged, so stay tuned. Hi, Ruth. I'm so excited you're here.
I'm so glad to be here.
So you found it okay. You found the church okay.
It's amazing. It's my first time downtown Dallas, I think. Really.
Yes. So what do you think?
It's really invigorating. And I mean, I'm like, wow, I could get lost here, though.
Yes.
I'm glad you walked me around.
We have a miniature Times Square. So it's like mini New York, not the church in downtown.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start today asking the question that we ask everybody. What do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for?
I can think of so many. So I'm just going to tell you a few of them. I wish Christians would stop apologizing for talking about how amazing grace really is. We seem to talk about it for salvation and then we stop talking about it. So that's one. Another would be that I wish that Christians would stop apologizing for promoting the work that God's called them to do. Like, promotion doesn't have to be self-promoting. It can be about sharing, truly bringing service to others of what God's called them to do. And then my last one probably would be that I'm an artist and an entrepreneur, and I so desperately want to see believers stop apologizing for excellence and creative standards that really elevate their work, not trying to just be good enough for being Christian art, but really, really solid quality artwork. So stop apologizing for having high standards for those things.
Okay, you're the first person that's had three answers. So wait, we need to talk about all of those. Those are fantastic. Goodness. Okay, so I became a Christian when I was 5, understood saved by grace, which for anyone listening means that you can't work your way to heaven. It's what Christ did on the cross for us that saves us, and we need to personally accept that. And that's the moment the Holy Spirit comes into our lives. But a lot of us stop talking about grace once we're saved. And we're fine telling people, not by works, but then once we're saved, all of a sudden it changes to, okay, but now you need to work really hard for
Right. Even
everything.
When you were just describing that, which you said it perfectly, that is the story of redemption. But why is it that we sometimes, as believers, Christ followers, we sometimes go, yeah, grace is what made me welcomed into the kingdom of heaven, but now I gotta preserve my place. I can see why it can be confusing, because I just got done saying, let's have a high standard of excellence. Right? But at the same time, we read in Ephesians 2, saved by grace through faith, not of your works. So which is it, right? So sometimes I think, and that's what I'm so passionate about, is really thinking, is it possible for us to not just be saved by grace, but sustained by grace? And I believe it's true. It's possible, because that's literally what salvation really is. And I think we have turned it around to start thinking I need Jesus to rescue me, but then I need to kind of save myself from now until heaven to make my life look Christian, look solid, do all the things to make me approved and worthy, when that's all part of the gift of grace.
Okay, so what's your definition for grace?
Grace is a free, unmerited favor and welcome from God. Now, before, all my church-going friends kind of glaze over and go, yes, I heard that in VBS. So let that register for a minute.
Okay.
The free, unmerited, as in you didn't do anything to deserve it, but he's welcomed you, caused you to draw near, and said, daughter, son, sit here right next to me, with me forever. You'll never need to leave my side. Now, when I say that, it's only a really, really great gift if you realize how far and how lost and how much you were drowning in self-reliance before. So what's really bothering all of us when we're when we say that in 2021 there's more mental health issues, more anxiety, more stress, is it possible that we're all struggling, not just because of global drama and pandemic and struggles, but just that we all want to be known and loved. We don't want conflict. We want to belong. We want to feel like we are worthy and that we have a place in this world. And so we're looking to our left and right. We're wanting people to like the comment we made on social media and not badger us to death. We want to be not misunderstood for what we feel or think when we're honestly trying to be real. And it doesn't help that we walk down the book aisles and there are a million self-help resources. There are endless resources saying, just do better, be faster, be the most amazing version of yourself, and everybody will be okay and will love you and will treat you the way you want to be treated. And so the answer and the remedy to that is so interesting because the gospel is the opposite. The gospel is come as you are, lacking all the ways to save yourself. And Christ, Jesus, will literally come and take the place of your trying to be perfect and actually make a new creation of who you are. And so that's what sustains us, is that he is at work, not just in the moment where you're like, I give up, but in the moment where you keep, in every moment from then on, that you realize, wow, I was never made to seek approval or to control my life on my own.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So I kind of think of sometimes what I hear people say is what you said, like, okay, well, grace whenever I mess up, because it's like, okay,
Like give yourself a little grace.
Like do the best you can,
Yeah.
but then whenever you mess up, just remember there's grace.
Yeah.
How would you bring grace into your life? Not you bring grace into your life, but how do you understand God's grace before you mess up? Like, you're a Christian.
Yeah.
Just in daily living. Like, what does that really practically look like?
So let's look at it on a really tangible level.
Okay.
Like if we read through any of Paul's epistles, right? Let's talk about Colossians because I love Colossians. But we always get to the part, we love to jump to chapter 4 or wherever it's like, do this and don't do this.
Right.
Be kind to each other.
Right.
Stop lying to each other. Put off this, put on this. And most of our young people listening will be like, yeah, we had a whole series on how to love one another and how to walk in a manner worthy.
Right.
But what does Paul do before he gives you all that instruction? He actually starts with what Christ has done. What in the world did Jesus do for us? And they knew. They already knew. The reader already knew, but he reminded them.
Right.
And then from there, he said, and that means because he's done this, now you are this. He tells you what your identity is in Christ. What would happen if all of us who are like, what do I need to do to be enough? How do I figure out, and then I'm going to screw up anyway. What if we started with who God is, who we are in him, and so that when we seek to operate out of that identity, when we screw up, we go right back to, but this is secure. What's
Right.
secure is my identity in Christ.
Right.
Unfortunately, what we do is we forget the part where God is God and we're not. And then we forget the part that our identity is rooted in him. And we just try to go live the Christian life. And I'm putting the quotes because we try to aim to look the part. So when we screw up, we go, oh, well, then God's disappointed with me. I failed. I'm not loved. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be rejected. And we forget that the whole of that walking out in faith is an outflowing
Right.
from what you really believe. And so we can actually trace what we really believe to what we will do in response, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so I've done tons on shame. That's a main way I was trained as a therapist. And I saw you say something about shame and honor. And I've definitely, I'm telling you, years of studying shame and helping people with that. Never have heard that. Can you explain what kind of you mean by that?
Yeah, and I think that pairing those two words together really comes out of my cultural context.
Okay.
I was born in Taiwan. I'm Chinese American, and I'm certainly no expert, but in an Asian American cultural mindset, shame and honor go hand in hand. You bring honor by avoiding shame, and not just to yourself, but to the people who are tied to you. So if you, I do think of the line in Mulan, right? I mean, you do immediately think of, bring honor to us all idea, right? But really, there's such a precedent set for saving face, making sure that you look right and you're doing the right thing, you're saying the right thing, you walk into the room prepared, that you're the best, and that you're not disappointing anybody.
Right.
Because disappointing anyone is not just making a mistake. It's like shameful. It's like, oh, well, you weren't raised right.
Right.
Why did you dress like that?
Oh.
Your parents, and it's not that, I'm not saying that this runs in every Asian American family. I'm just saying, culturally, there's a strong sense of you are what you do.
Right.
Right? It's less about you are your identity based on anything else, but what you can actually achieve and show as a life offering of like what you've accomplished. And so,
I think that's here too. I think that people don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
So
we see it every day, right? We see it every day on social media.
Yes, I think that's definitely like a stereotype of certain cultures and maybe is pervasive, but I see it in lots of different demographics and families, but they don't know what to call it.
Right.
And so I think that's what's really helpful with what you talk about.
Well, and I think that what feels a little bit passive aggressive sometimes is really just it. The truth is, we all act in a way where we say, what you accomplish really defines who you are. And that's really the connection of shame, right? You're the expert. But I think the shame component is that it's more than just feeling bad about what you did.
Right.
It's feeling bad that you are not who you want to. Like, you'll never be up to standard, or you're never going to be good enough. And I think that's where the shame kind of weighs us down, because the only two responses to striving is either to try way harder or to give up altogether.
Yes.
And so when you feel shame and when you feel like I never measure up to my church or to my family, to my spouse, to my friends, and maybe in the back of your mind to God, if you have that paradigm where you don't know how to ever meet that standard, then the shame will set in, and you either keep on the hamster wheel of striving or you give up and go, I'm done. I don't want to try to please anyone anyway. I'll just please myself.
Right.
And that's where self-help comes in.
Yes, we used to explain it as superhuman and subhuman, but you just need to live. Actually, one way it was explained was just healthy shame. Like, I can't be all things to all people. I am going to mess up. But self-help, psychology, it can only go so far.
Right.
It doesn't mean
Those
that
are
it's
good
all
tools,
wrong
right?
and that it's
No,
all,
yeah.
I mean, some of the most helpful things I know are from that, but there's a limit to it.
Yes.
Whenever you don't involve Christianity and you don't ultimately see things from God's perspective, for sure. Okay, so how do you live in the actual middle? How do you live in the healthy place?
So I think, to your point, self-help and self-improvement gives us tools.
Right.
Because we have to have tools. I mean, you do get up tomorrow morning, you don't just sit back and go, I'll just let God and my identity in Christ make breakfast. Like, that's not what we do, right?
That's a great example.
I mean, that's not what happens. You still have to get
I
up.
was a terrible person today, but it's okay because
So
there's grace.
There's grace, and therefore the blood of Christ will just make it right. I don't have to go call up my friend and apologize. That's not the truth, right? And so, practically speaking, don't let this wash over you, just glaze over you. You have to start and think through the fact that if we look at it biblically, grace is meant to fuel good works. It's not that we do good works to earn grace. So the whole point was, it's not your good works. It has nothing to do with you being religious or smart or pretty or having a lot of Instagram followers or being in a 3-hour Bible study every morning for your quiet time. That does not earn favor with God.
Right.
But having favor with God changes everything. Having that favor with God, that's why it's so important to me for my kids and for the next generation to not grow numb to how amazing grace really is. Because when we recognize that God's welcome is free and true and good and meant to transform us, then what flows out of that is when you get up in the morning, and let's just be honest, or maybe this is, speaking about a friend, but, when you wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed, and when you're maybe struggling and you're saying, I don't really know, I just feel exhausted and I don't know how to do this today.
Right.
no, instead of striving out of like, but I will, because nobody will like me if I don't get this done, and I'm going to check off my list so that I'll have approval. That's striving. But grace fuels the conversation that starts like this. Lord, thank you for giving me breath today. You've made me on purpose, and you've made a way for me to be in your presence forevermore, whether I screwed up yesterday or I screw up today.
Yeah.
And because you love me so much, I'm going to get out of bed, because this life is not mine, it's yours. And because of that, I can step forward and go and make breakfast, go right that wrong, go deal with the emails in my inbox, not because I'm going to have a horrible life if I don't do those things, or I'm going to like not be loved or welcomed, or I'm going to have all my circumstances completely fall apart.
Right.
But I trust you, and I know that it brings honor to you when I live my life in accordance and in alignment to how much you've loved me first. That's literally the prayer I have to pray almost every day. I literally have to pray.
Is it hard to have 6 boys, or
you know,
do you get tired?
I gotta tell you, it is literally, whether your circumstance is like mine, that's like unlikely, 6 boys or triplets. I mean, those are unlikely, definitely difficult circumstances. But you might have one special needs child. You
Right.
might be a single mom. You might be working in a job situation, maybe even at a church that is really conflicted and struggling.
Right.
You might have a spouse that's walking away from the Lord. There are so many things that can
Right.
keep us from wanting to get up in the morning. You might be in a community that's not agreeing on anything about what's going on in this world right now, you know, and all those things can make it so difficult to want to bring excellence, to show up to your life, and to do the hard things God's called you to do. And so grace isn't the ticket out of that hard circumstance. It's not like, oh, because of grace, I'm not going to show up for my day. I'm not going to, it'll be fine.
Right.
God will take care of it. I don't have to do anything. No, because of grace, you say, this life, I'm not going to manipulate it through striving to get the results I want. I'm going to trust that God's work is finished,
Right.
and that will fuel my day being offered back to him.
That's so good.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It is certainly hard, but I'm telling you, I didn't just make that up. I mean, hopefully we know that I didn't just make that up. That's actually paraphrasing and really redistributing what we learn from the word. And so the example set in the word is what we have to go back to. And that's why being biblically illiterate is not going to help any of us. You know,
Right.
just being like, oh, I went to Instagram for my quick meme of the day. That's not going to help us.
Yes.
We have to go back and go, what is the heart of God,
Right.
and why did he send Jesus? Because if we start there and realize how desperate we were without Christ, grace will become so much more amazing than we're giving it credit for.
Yeah, that's so good. Think about just my grace is sufficient for you. Her power is
Absolutely.
perfected in weakness.
Yes,
That's
ma'am. Yeah.
amazing. And it's true. Like sometimes people's stories talk about having a lot of kids or multiples, but I mean, everyone has difficult things. Everyone
hard
gets
story.
tired. Everyone
Absolutely.
has a hard time getting things
Yes.
done at certain points for
Sure.
whatever reason. So I want to go back to something that we talked about off before we started recording, because you and I have similar denomination backgrounds, and certainly that's not, neither of us I know would say that's who we are, but that is how we were taught. And you talked about how a lot of times with women it's about scrapbooking and painting, and as someone who literally hates crafts, it's hard to figure out where sometimes women fit in if we don't look like we love to cook, or we love to do the what's been just kind of stereotypically feminine. So what do you say to that? How do we make places for women?
Yeah. The best seasons of my life as a mom, as a business owner, as a wife, have been seasons where I have dug in deep theologically and thought on things that were much richer than how do I take one verse and apply it to my life today and have a good attitude. That's not a bad thing to do. If you have to start there because you're in a busy season, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think we undermine how women can change the world because we forget to have a deeper conversation to educate and strengthen women for leadership.
Wow.
Meaning, ultimately, if we think that the next generation will know how to lead, treat women well, serve their communities and have wisdom, it's going to be because women weren't just making cookies.
Right.
It will be because women were taught the Bible, and that women were discipled, and that women were discipling women, and that women were leading ministries besides hospitality. Even though hospitality is absolutely the entry, it is the entryway into every ministry. But so many women don't enjoy cutting, gluing, decorating.
No, nothing spiritual about that for me.
Yeah,
like it really
some women
takes
deeply
my energy.
Yeah, some women deeply want to have a conversation about the hard things of the Bible, or maybe want to really understand core doctrines of their faith that nobody's spent the time to talk to them about. And it doesn't mean that you have to get a seminary degree, and it doesn't mean that you need to go and be some public minister. It means that every one of us needs to be an everyday theologian if we want to change the world. And so there's no more room for us to just say, even if your service in the church is that you're bringing 24 cookies, I love it. If you can make cookies, I'm like so grateful for you.
Yes.
But don't underestimate the fact that you as a woman are given every opportunity with the Lord to grow in your faith and impact the people in your home and your community for the gospel at a deeper level than just what you can produce.
Right. And I talk to a lot of younger girls called to ministry, and I can't tell you how many conversations they just look at me and say, so what can I do? I mean, I'm not interested in children's ministry. I'm not interested in baking cookies. So what is there for me? And I think that that's a really important part of reaching this next generation, because they want to lead and they want to influence, and they're obviously smart and driven and care about culture and things going on in the world. So we need to empower, not just confine them to one area.
And I think one of the ways we do that is we set the example of not having gatherings necessarily be centered around a craft or fashion or having tea only, right? Where some of the women really enjoy graphic design, and they want to help serve their communities by creating good logos, right? Or running sound equipment. I mean, I think about all the ways in which women have strong, creative, and even like super wise input for so many departments besides simply on things of hospitality, decor, or children. Even though all of us were made nurturing and in some ways, absolutely, domestic and hospitality oriented. But goodness, I have never met a mom who is more effective than a mom who knows her Bible.
Right.
And so let's invest there. Let's invest in the younger generation to know their Bibles, because it could go the other direction. Don't you agree? Like we can say, well, women are gifted at all these things. So we say, do those things. And if it doesn't flow out of knowing Christ in a deeper way, then we're just creating a problem in the other opposite direction.
And because I think also just knowing how you're gifted, like what has God given you to do, what abilities, what giftings, and where we are most fulfilled. And I think not in shame when we are doing what we're called to do. I mean, not that it's a wonderful way to go, but if somebody told me personally, like the way that I'm driven and excited to do ministry, if I am not serving in my church and I am not speaking and writing, that doesn't help me fulfill my calling. I've had times where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna forget these things that I'm really passionate about, and maybe I should just really try to learn to cook, and maybe I should really try to learn to do these things. But it's not how God's gifted me. It's not where my passion lies. And so really it was still a shame. I mean, I ended up in shame because it's not my favorite thing, and it's not really the major way I contribute to my family or to my community. So I mean, I just think there's a lot of freedom there.
Yes.
In realizing,
and there's no formula. And I don't think there's any magic in being the best casserole maker. There's no magic there.
But I'm glad some people do it.
But I would say, yes. But I would say also, when we're talking about the topic of striving, for example, striving can come in, it's sneaky. You can be a striver domestically and take pride in controlling your environment by making a home cooked meal, but you could also be a striver by avoiding serving your family and saying, well, I don't want to do that because I'm so much better at these things that make me feel like I have self-worth. So isn't it really a matter of the heart, right? Because at the end of the day, we're just called to serve. We're called to do hard things. We're called to be faithful right where we are. Yeah. And if right where we are, right that minute is to clean out your pantry, whether we like it or not, sometimes that really will help get our families reestablished. And nobody likes to clean out your pantry, but some of us are better at it. Some of us are not so good at it, but we still do it anyway.
Right.
But to not be fearful to step out. I think that's more importantly what we're saying is for the next generation, don't be afraid if God's wired you to write a lot or to speak the things that you're growing in, or to be artistic or to run sound equipment, whatever it is, step out and know that you can use those things to the glory of God.
Yes. So I've had to change that some because since I work so much with the teenagers, I'll come up with girly events and they'll raise their hand and say, but can we do what the boys are doing? And so just even changing that a little bit and not confining to one idea about womanhood and girls, of course. Okay, so I do want to talk about, because your book is, of course, When Strivings Cease, and the counselor in me loves talking about balance and getting everything in order and reducing anxiety. The minister in me knows we don't have enough people serving in the church. Most Christians don't witness. That's the statistic. Never share the gospel. And so what is the balance there? Because I hear a lot of people say, well, we're not going to make it to church because I've worked all week and it's important to have family time, or I can't serve because then we're out too late. And so that really is the two different sides that I see. What can you say to that?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is I still go back to the Apostle Paul, and he exhorts us to walk in a manner worthy. It is not walking in a manner worthy of the grace that we've been called to sit it out and to not be part of the body and to not serve. Now, I think the part that we get hung up in is we're not bound to the law. We're not earning our favor by signing up for children's ministry. We are not suddenly in the family of God just because we're tithing. That's not the ticket in.
Right.
But when we don't give, when we don't serve, when we don't evangelize, when we have no burden for our neighbors who don't know Jesus, then you have to stop and say, well, then is that walking in the manner worthy? And is there a reason why you are not compelled at all? And as harsh and maybe hard as it sounds, it may be a good time to assess whether you really are a recipient of grace. Because when you're a recipient of grace, it changes the trajectory of your life. You start realizing, again, like I said, I was praying, you say, this life is not my own. Meaning, it might be more convenient for me to stay home and never go back to church, because why not just watch something on the internet and not have to deal with messy relationships? Because you and I both know going to church means that you have to be vulnerable. You might have to resolve a conflict. You might have to learn to work with people and love people that are not like you. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're called to. That is walking in a manner worthy. So again, I go back to the thought that grace fuels so much more than we think. And grace ultimately fuels what striving can't produce, which means if you're going after comfort or an easier schedule and you're like, oh, we've had a really long week, I don't think we're going to serve, we're not going to go to Bible study, whatever it is, that may actually not get you any further, by being like, oh, I'm going to sit this out. But you have to start back with your heart and say, okay, am I trying to secure a comfort level that Jesus has really asked me to give to him and rest in him? And yes, of course, we all have to put some boundaries up and decide, have we overcommitted? Are we saying yes to everything? But I think that some of those things shake out and help us. We're more able to discern those things if we start with the place of going, am I starting with who God is, why he's put me here in this life right this minute, and then what is my response from here? Because actually being grateful for the grace of God will fuel a desire to love him back and serve him.
And we keep talking about Paul, and of course, Paul understood grace. I mean, a killer of Christians who then ended up, of course, having the road to Damascus conversion. But he was pretty busy. Then he was the greatest missionary.
He didn't
like
become a recipient of grace, then just sit around.
Right.
He actually, it fueled and compelled him. He was like, I think Randy Alcorn said it this one time like this in a different context. He said, when your treasure is in heaven, then every single day of your life is running towards your true treasure.
It's amazing.
But when your treasure is here on earth, then every day you feel like you're losing out. Like it's one less day of being able to have your treasure. So if our true treasure is Christ and the grace of God that secures heaven for us, then you actually run with greater speed.
Right.
Because you know that your days, are limited, and every single day is one more step towards your greatest treasure, rather than feeling like scarcity mentality. I got to hold on to my treasure here on earth. You see how that's a different mentality and causes you to actually want to serve more, give up your life more, because you're actually heading towards your treasure.
Right. That's fantastic. I think social media is a really funny kind of focus group, but it's a good focus group of seeing like how people are thinking and
right.
Christians, and you get a snapshot into people's lives. Of course, this usually highlight reel, but it's an easy way to see how people are thinking. And I just know I see a lot of people go back to the famous quote, if you want to change the world,
yes, Mother Teresa,
on your family.
Go home and love your family.
Right. And that's so good. I think one thing that we do in our family, and I would love to hear what you do with your boys, is we don't separate. Like, we don't separate our ministry from our family time. We're like, this is how God's called our whole family. And so we say, like, we are in ministry. Of course, they're toddlers, but so that there's not always this conversation of, oh, hopefully this is over by 1:00 so we can finally go home. Right. Like, instead of we're the same way. It's all of us.
We're the same way, even to the point, and I don't think I share this very often, so I'll say it here, but even when I write an Instagram post, I have my boys read it so often. My husband always reads it. They know what I'm doing on my phone. I don't go sit in the corner and go, I'm busy. I'm like, hey guys, I'm really trying to serve people. God's given me this audience. I literally don't know why I have these people here, but that God gave them to me. So I'm going to try to serve them well. What do you think? Does this represent what happened today? Do you guys want to read this and think, so that they're part of it.
Right.
And I'm not separating sacred and the secular.
Right.
That we're putting those two things together. And ultimately, it's kind of living out the Deuteronomy 6 idea that we would talk about his faithfulness when we rise, when we go to sleep, when we're going along our way. It should be about our everyday life. And so then you stop thinking, am I doing this for God? And then now this is me time. Oh, now this is my church ministry time. And now this is my soccer time. When really, if you're a sideline soccer mom, that is ministry time with the mom sitting next to you. If you have a ministry opportunity to lead at church, go and lead that. But know that every minute of your life is about stewardship. Yes. And so I'm not just trying to be lofty about saying it, but I think it changes your mind. It makes you, if you realign with that and say, stop thinking that you've been given some minutes to serve the Lord with and some minutes for you to strive and make something of yourself.
Yes.
Everything is a gift from the Lord and it's for the Lord, right?
Yes.
So ultimately that shapes the way we act and what we say yes or no to.
And how we explain things to our kids.
Yeah.
So our daughter's type A already and just mini me. And so she'll say, what's the plan today? And it was a few Saturdays ago. And I mean, it was an all day student ministry day, but instead it was, we are doing this. We are going to talk to the teenage girls about how much God loves them and how that influences friendship, and then let her come see it. And I mean, there becomes too much of a push and pull if we, and people used to say, the thinking used to be that you needed to kind of put this time is this time and separate. I think I'm glad that that's changing.
Well, and I think probably because there was some really unhealthy versions of, right? Yeah. So much was unhealthy about, and I do think that the thing that's tricky about it, that for anyone who's in ministry and listening to this conversation going, okay, well, we'll just bring all the kids along and we'll do all the things. I think that is how we do it. But I think that the thing that we have to be sensitive about is recognizing that they won't always understand what is happening at every season. Right. So explaining to them what is going on and then having the bandwidth to hear their needs really matters. And so for us, just as a side note, just like rest is really very biblical and very much reflective that God is God and we are not. Yes. In the same way, sometimes not scheduling nothing in your calendar is scheduling something, right? Having days, especially as your kids get older, and yours are little right now, but I will tell you in another couple of years, to have some days in your calendar that are scheduled purposely scheduled as like nothing's going on today, means that conversation will spring up in your home while you're doing the dishes, that there will be an opportunity for a child to cry and break down, and there will be room to say, yeah, I made room for us to have these conversations.
Oh, you stepped right into my last question, because I wanted you, just obviously as such an experienced mom, what is your best advice for moms of preschoolers and the young years?
And first of all, I just want to say it's hard because it is. I mean, you're not crazy when you think that it's hard and that you're one person going, I'm changing diapers, I'm dealing with tantrums, and everything's sticky all the time, you know? You can do everything. You just can't do it all at once in the same season. So the feeling that's overwhelming when you're still folding the laundry and nap time's about to be over and you go, but Ruth said, try to find time to paint in your, I'm an artist. And so it's easy to say, oh, try to paint when the kids are down. Don't give up on that just because it can't happen all at once.
Right.
Do not, I love the phrase, give yourself a little grace, but I want to give you a twist on that. It's not just give yourself a little grace as in, I'm doing a good enough job. I mean, I wash my hair past, which truly, if you wash your hair today, you're doing awesome. But give yourself some grace as in, give yourself a good dose of the grace by which you've been saved. Remind yourself the truth that your identity does not come from how much you got done today, how well your preschoolers behaved, or how many letters they know how to read now. Like, give yourself the grace of where your true hope comes from. Right. And then tomorrow is a new day and start again. And I think it keeps us from giving up and thinking, I'm not succeeding at what I'm doing, when really your success was never meant to be found in how great of a mom or how organized or how clean your tables are. We strive in grace, not for grace.
Oh, man, that's amazing. All right. How do we get your book? How do we stay connected to you? How do we keep feeling this grace you're talking about?
Well, I love being able to encourage others through my Instagram account at Ruth Chou Simons. That's RuthChouSimons. You can find my artwork and my business products at gracelace.com. And please learn more about the book at Strivings Cease.com.
It's amazing. Thank you so much
Thanks
for being
for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Unapologetic. Remember that you can hear this episode and others at ptv.org/Julia and wherever you get your podcasts.